Okay, so in this video we're going to determine the characteristic of a equation of the parabola. So with the given equation of the parabola, you're to determine the vertex, the focus, the axis symmetry, and the directrix. So before we go into the first example, I want to cover that in the textbook this is the equation form that is given. Now, if it were switch, such as this, as you can see for this form, where the square is on the x, you see how the 4p times y minus k is switch, and then x minus h, or should I say the square of x minus h, were switch. So basically, this is from the book, but if you were to have this problem, where it's switch, such on like a quiz or on a test, it's just the same but different sides. So instead of from the book, the problem, say like you were given on a homework, quiz, or a test, instead of being on the right side, now it's on the left side. Compared to the original from the textbook, now the left side is on the right side. So I could say for the same thing for the other form, where the square is on the y. From the textbook, the one on the right side is now on the left side, and then from the left side now on the right side. So even if they're on different sides, it still means the same thing as long as they're identical. So I emphasize on the sign right here, and then the 4p respectively. So they are on the corresponding side. That means that they're the same regardless if it's switch. So be familiar with the form from the textbook and be familiar with a different form of it, meaning that these two sides were switched compared to the one from the textbook. So just be ready when you see a problem like this, say on a homework, on a quiz, or on a test, including your future exams, future homework, future quizzes when you take higher level math classes. In our first example, we have 12 times the y plus 5 equal the square of x plus 7. Alright, so we have the square on the x. So basically the form of 4p times y minus k equal to the square of x minus h. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is find the vertex. The vertex are the numbers that are next to x and y. Now bear in mind, the definition for the vertex will always be the opposite sign. So for example, from the general formula, or the standard equation of a parabola, is always going to be a positive k and a positive h if it was minus. But in this example, it's plus. So the vertex is h comma k in parentheses. It's a coordinate point. So h is always with the x. Since it's plus 7, it's going to be negative 7. And then the k is always with the y. Since it's plus 5, it's going to be negative 5. Alright, so that's the vertex. Next, we're going to find the focus. Now the focus, we have to know the p-value. So before we can find a focus, we have to find the p-value. So the p-value in this example will be in front of y, so this one right here. Now, in order to find a p-value, because in the standard equation, it's 4p. So in our example, it's 12. So what we're going to do, I'm going to set 4p equal to 12 from the example, and then I'm going to divide by 4. Now p will equal to 12 divided by 4, which is 3. Alright, so the focus is the same thing. It's a coordinate point where it's going to be h, k, plus p. So h is the same, so -7. Now it's going to be -5 plus 3, which is essentially -7, comma, -2. So that will be the focus. Next, you're going to find the axis of symmetry. So I'm just going to write axis of symmetry, or AOS for short. And that's going to be the easiest. Axis of symmetry is basically x equals to h. So basically, our axis of symmetry will equal to our h value, which is -7. So x equal -7. That was it. And then last, we're going to find the directrix. And then the formula is going to be y equal k minus p. So y is going to equal to k, which is our -5, minus p, which is 3. So essentially that's going to be y equal -8. So those are the 4 characteristics of the equation of the parabola in our first example. So our vertex will be this, our focus will be this, the axis of symmetry, and the directrix. So those are the 4 components you would need when it comes to graphing. You'll be able to graph the vertex once you find the focus and the axis of symmetry, the directrix. It will be easy for you to graph rather than trying to plug and chug each point to get a coordinate point and then graph from each point, meaning that you may have to do like 5 points or maybe 7 points to get a proper graph. But here, once you find each component, each part, vertex, focus, axis of symmetry, directrix, it would be a lot easier to graph that way. In our second example, we have 3 times x plus 8 equal to the square of y minus 10. So I wrote the standard equation of the parabola. Alright, so the first thing is going to be the vertex, which is h comma k. Now, this one's different from the first example because the square is on a y now, but the order of the vertex will be the same. H is always going to be the number that's with x. Now here, it's plus 8 within the example, so that means the opposite sign is -8. And then the k value is the one with the y. Since it's minus 10, the opposite will be positive 10. So that's our vertex. Alright, next we're going to find the focus, but before we can actually find the focus, we have to find the p-value. So, I'm going to set 4p equal to the number that's in front of the x, which is 3. And then I'm going to divide by 4. So therefore, p is equal to 3/4. Now, the focus for this form, meaning the square on a y, it will be h plus p comma k. So the k will stay the same, but we're going to get a different h value. So our h value is -8. So -8 plus 3/4 comma k, which is 10. So -8 plus 3/4. So I'm going to change -8 into a fraction with a common denominator. So this will be, I'm going to write it here for more space. So -32 over 4 plus 3/4, comma 10. Now I didn't do the whole stuff because it expected for you to know how to convert this into a fraction with a common denominator. So negative 32 over 4 plus 3 over 4, that's going to be negative 29 over 4, which you cannot simplify, so I'm going to leave it like that, comma 10. So this is our focus. Alright, next we're going to find the axis of symmetry, or AOS for short, or in some cases it might just say axis. Now axis of symmetry is going to be y equal to k. So y equal to our k value, which is just 10. Now the directions. Oops. Now for this one, it's going to be x equal h minus p. So it will be x equal h, which is negative 8. Now I could just write negative 8, but I already did the fraction for it, so it's going to be negative 32 over 4 minus 3 over 4, which is our p-value. So therefore, it will be x equal negative 32 over 4 minus 3 over 4. That would become negative 35 over 4. So if you were to graph this, then you would have to convert this into a decimal. But if I were just asking you to determine the vertex, the focus, the axis of symmetry, the directrix, just leave it as a fraction. Don't worry about converting to a decimal. So as I repeat, if I'm just asking you for the vertex, the focus, the axis of symmetry, and the directrix, leave it as a fraction. When it comes to graphing, you will need decimal, but only for graphing. Alright, so that's all I needed. So here's the vertex, here's the focus, the axis of symmetry, and the directrix for this example. In our third example, we have 1/2 times x minus h equal to the square of y plus 10. Alright, so we see that the square is on the y, so make sure you remember how to find the vertex, the focus, axis of symmetry, and the directrix. Alright, so the vertex is the same, which is h comma k. So therefore, our vertex will be the number that's next to x will be for the h. So since it's minus 7, just simply positive 7. Our k value is the number with y. Since it's plus 10, the opposite will be negative 10. So that's going to be our vertex. Alright, next is the focus, but before we can find the focus, we have to find the p-value. So it's going to be 4p equal to 1/2. So when we divide by 4, this is essentially p will equal to 1/2 divided by 4, which I changed that to a fraction. So I'm going to change that to multiplication of fraction. So p, right arrow, p is equal to 1/2 times 1/4. So therefore, p will equal to 1/8. So make sure you remember how to work with fraction when it comes to division and multiplication. So once we find our p-value, our focus is h plus p comma k. So therefore, our h value, which is 7, plus 1 over 8, comma, negative 10. That's our k value. Alright, so since we have a whole number plus a fraction, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change 7 into a fraction with a common denominator of 8. So that will be 56 over 8 plus 1 over 8, comma, negative 10. So therefore, our focus will be 57 over 8, comma, negative 10. So that will be our focus. Alright, the axis of symmetry, the easy part. Will be y equal to k. So our axis of symmetry is y equal to negative 10. That's it. Alright, the last part, the directions. Is x equal h minus p. So x will equal h, which is 7, and then p is 1/8. Now it's going to be a whole number and a fraction, but with subtraction. So instead of just writing 7, I'm going to write 56 over 8 because I already converted into a fraction with a common denominator of 8. So x will equal to 56 over 8 minus 1 over 8. So therefore, x will equal to 55 over 8. So that's going to be our directions. And that's all we needed. So here's our vertex, our focus, axis of symmetry, and the directions. So what's different about in this example is that now we have a fraction in front of the x, and it would be the same process if it were in front of the y. Since we had a fraction and we were solving for the p-value, so when I divide by 4, it's basically 1/2 divided by 4 over 1. Change it to a multiplication by flipping the second fraction and get p equal to 1 over 8. But the process of adding and subtracting fraction is the same. Convert into a fraction and then common denominator of 8, which is in this case 56 over 8. In the fourth example, we have 1/3 times y plus 2 is equal to the square of x minus 2. Now the square is on the x, so it's going to be a different form, different equation, meaning that it's going to be different for the focus and the directions and the axis of symmetry. Now the first part is the vertex. Which is h comma k. H is always the number in front of or with the x, excuse me. So since it's minus 2, it's going to be a positive 2. And then the k is always with the y. Since it's plus 2, it's going to be negative 2. So that's it for the vertex. Now, before we find the focus again, we got to find the p-value. Just like the last example, we have a fraction. So it's going to be 4p equal to 1/3. So I'm going to divide by 4. P is equal to 1/3 divided by 4 over 1. So therefore, P will equal to 1/3 times 1/4. Therefore, P will equal to 1 over 12. Alright, now to find the focus, this will be h, comma, k plus p. So h is just positive 2. Now k would be negative 2 and then plus 1 over 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change negative 2 into a fraction with a common denominator of 12. So that's going to be 2 comma negative 24 over 12 plus 1/12. So now it's going to be 2 comma, combining these two fractions would be negative 23 over 12. So that's our focus. Now the axis of symmetry, the easy part. AOS or axis. So if you see where it says axis, that means axis of symmetry. X equals h, so therefore x will equal to our h value, which is just 2. That's it. Alright, now the last part, the directrix. It's going to be y equal k minus p. Alright. Now, the k value is negative 2 and the p value is 1 over 12. Now, I already converted negative 2 into a fraction with a common denominator of 12. So I'm just simply going to write y equal negative 24 over 12 minus our p value, which is 1 over 12. So therefore, it's going to be y equal negative 25 over 12. And then you're just going to leave it as a fraction. So that's our directrix. Y equals negative 25 over 12. So our vertex, our focus, our axis of symmetry, and then our directrix right here. So those are the 4 components, 4 characteristics of the equation of the parabola of the last example.